Okay, people are still coming in, but I think we'll get started. This webinar today, thank you for joining the Broad Sky monthly webinar series. We're going to talk about POTS replacement, and which would include either replacement or new construction. And then another thing we're going to talk about is a product where we can put a POTS line and an internet connection together at the same time, which is something that only Broad Sky is able to do in the market to our knowledge. So we're already in the feature enhancement mode on this product. And we can't not talk about COVID. So I'm just going to put this out there as well. We don't have details on this. We didn't write the webinar for this. However, we are seeing a surge in demand for telehealth, office worker from home, and any type of, bottom line, we just send all our workers home, and in some niche of that, some percentage of that, they don't have reliable internet access from home, and or their companies would rather have them be on a dedicated circuit for a variety of reasons. Whether, as of right now, just in my personal example, my son's home from college, my two kids are home from school, and they're pounding the internet. Now, they're forbidden for pounding the internet for the next hour, but as a general rule, home internet use has surged. And then if you extrapolate out to every neighborhood, there's only X amount of capacity during the day. So we have a lot of people trying the home internet use. There are companies who want their workers to have dedicated internet access that they solely use for the internet. And so we can provide that service. It's not the topic of this, but please look for upcoming announcements for that. Contact your channel manager for that. We're ready to deliver that right now. And I'm sorry, I'm hearing somebody type on their keyboard who's not on mute. Would it be possible to not do that? Thank you so much. And so, yeah, please contact your channel manager for your remote worker access. Also, if they're putting telehealth or people need to put internet access onto health. Okay, all right, so that's the telehealth update. We'll talk about it again at the end, but let's cover the POTS seminar because that's what you joined up to learn about. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We don't sell CCAS. We do that's intentional by choice. What we've decided to focus on is being a company that delivers value-added services over wireless, connecting to the LTE networks of AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. Those networks, the characteristics of those networks, if you think about it on a broader scope, they are ubiquitous, they're reliable, they're in every community. If you are connected to city sewer, you can get this service. And so it's a national internet platform, and there is no other national internet platform, if you think about it, where you can order service anywhere and it works the same everywhere. So that gives you the opportunity to do single billing, single point of contact, and deploy a uniform solution in sort of a rapid time frame. We're not waiting 1 to 3 months, coordinating with 18 different CLECs and cable providers and aggregators and secondary providers across the country to get service in while they look it up to see what they can get for you. Broad Sky can deliver something in 1 to 3 weeks. If it's a single order, we can get it there in 2 days. If it's a 100-site rollout, give us a little more time. But no one can deliver service to the end user as quickly as Broad Sky can. The reason for that is the network's already there. The towers are already there. What we provide is a router that translates that wireless signal that's already present at the location into a usable business-grade internet service. And then we drop down into, accepting that first. And then second, what applications can you connect to it? Well, failover, primary internet, a lot of the other things we talk about. But today we're going to talk about another aspect of that, which is translating that wireless signal into a POTS line or a copper line, or there's a lot of different terms for it, but everyone likes POTS. I used to think that POTS stood for plain old telephone service. I think it was the first acronym I ever learned. Our marketing director said to me yesterday that originally POTS stand for post office telephone service, going all the way back to when the telephone exchange, the people who were actually unplugging and plugging wires in to connect a call, were all at the post office. So that acronym predates even plain old telephone service. So if you put that in context, these are the copper lines that were laid between 1930 and 1960 to every building in the country. And that's what carried the calls. There's two characteristics to a copper line. We tend to focus on only one of them. A copper line, one, is a communications medium. However, two, copper lines carry power. And we don't think about the power side. We tend to focus on connecting point A to point B. But the power side is another element to copper. And so we want to talk about the power piece of it as well, or kind of put that in our minds or put it back in our minds. And the reason for that is that the device on the other end is expecting not only a communications link from that connection, it's also expecting power. And so we have to talk about that as well when you're powering something on the other end. Just as a for instance, if you're in an elevator line and you take that, open up that little panel and there's a phone handset in there, when you go off hook, that opens the connection and the power for that phone is coming from the other side. It's expecting power as well as an open link. And so if we're going to replace that service, we have to replace the link, but we also have to power it. And kind of, so put that power thought in your mind, because it's old knowledge, but it's old knowledge that's relevant again. Okay. All right, so again, going back to us, we've been on the Inc. 5000 list 3 years in a row. That's a product of two things. One, the networks have become very reliable, and the equipment that you connect to it has become accessible and reliable. However, the third step to that, you still have to pick the right equipment and you still have to engineer it properly to interface with all modern communications gear. That's the BroadSky difference. Honestly, as good as we like to think we are at marketing, at the end of the day, BroadSky is an engineering company with a sales and marketing overlay. So where we find ourselves coming to the fore over and over and over again is on the solution side. We make it work, the customer's happy, and they continue to roll it out. We won the MSV Channel Futures Award. That was a nice recognition of some of the things we've been able to do. And then in the field, we can actually roll out and install this, and this is particularly applicable to POTS because it comes down to installation and execution. Our sister company is TechLink Services. That is a BroadSky co-owned company, if you will. We share some office space and we're both in Bend, Oregon. So that's the coordination side of installing these. And if you're gonna sell POTS, you have an install. There's no self-install in the POTS world. So you need someone who can take it in-house and take care of it for you, not hand it off to someone else who may or may not know what they're doing. And so that's sort of the BroadSky overview. So our agenda today on the POTS is, the market update, the replacement using LTE POTS replacement, and then we're going to talk about a product where we're combining a POTS replacement and internet failover. Talk about some of the differences of what we bring to the market. And then we're going to talk again at the end about sort of a remote workforce support product. And thank you for the 25 people joined since I started. So thank you for joining the BroadSky webinar. We're into it, and we're looking forward to all of your questions at the end on the Q&A. Okay, so let's talk about POTS. Personally, I started doing this in 1991. I would walk into phone rooms and I would count lines. I would look at the MDF. I would look at the tags. We'd count the lines and then we'd convert them over to a new long distance carrier, or we'd get rid of copper lines to put a T1 in, and that sort of helped fund it. So that I spoke this language 28 years ago, and it's interesting to me that this language is coming back around. So a POTS line is nothing more than a copper line that can carry signal and carries power. And they were everywhere, right? The estimate now is that there's still 35 million POTS lines out there, of which 27% are business lines. And that's the total market opportunity we're looking at. So the total addressable market, based on what we've come up with so far, is somewhere around 9.5 million business lines at $65 a line. So you have an MRC total addressable market out there of $650 million a month. A month. I know SD-WAN and CCAS are big opportunities for everybody, but $650 million is an enormous amount of money. So that's the TAM that we're fighting over, or marketing to, I guess would be a gentler word. So if we're looking at a $650 million revenue swing, what percentage of those have to move is question one, and over what time frame is question two. So let's talk about some of the evidence of why this is moving and when it's going to move. Okay, so what's behind all this, bottom line, is that all the providers who provide copper are not making money on their copper. Verizon transferred 5 million odd lines to Frontier 3 years ago, trying to shed their business. AT&T wants to shed their copper. CenturyLink talks about shedding their copper at all times. When they put it in air quotes, if you read their stock reports, what they're talking about is moving to high margin business. Well, moving to high margin business means getting out of copper. And so starting at the top, they don't want to be in this business anymore. But what was keeping them in it was still a highly regulated market. Going all the way back to the breakup of AT&T, you had to provide copper and you had to provide it to everybody at the same price. You could not charge what the market would bear. There was a set price and everybody got the same. After years of lobbying by the Verizons and the AT&Ts and the CenturyLinks of the world, they have gotten the federal government to say, we're going to relax those rules. And that's why this becomes a total addressable market. So headline, Verizon's discontinuing copper in New York, January 13th. That was on Channel Partners. AT&T is cutting more jobs in their copper division. That was in 2019. CenturyLink wants out in Grand Rapids. These headlines are bubbling up all over the place. But what you're seeing is local regulatory relief in pockets of a larger trend. Every one of these providers wants out. None of them want to do this anymore. And so the opportunity for us is to replace that service. They don't want to be in it. We do. And we can provide it using the same concept I said before. Send a wireless signal in, translate it into a copper emulation, I guess you will. Give it the same functionality as that the copper line did before. And there's $650 million monthly up for grabs. So more research that we've done, the FCC, this is a government-driven process. The FCC allows the companies to get out, then they have to post a public notice. What we're seeing is 3-month notice to end users in residential. That's not our TAM. And 6-month notices to businesses. That is our TAM. Our plan is, as this keeps going, is to regularly update this. And how this is going to play out is it's going to go regional. So this won't be like SD-WAN where everybody can have it now. But the way this is going to work is more like this. Regions of the country some regions are going to be first and some regions are going to be last. They'll make an announcement, they'll have a 6-month window, it then has to be replaced. So we're going to see this, if you have a nationwide customer base, you'll see New York scrambling for it and Arizona doesn't care. And then 6 months later, Arizona cares, but Iowa doesn't, like that. So follow this regionally and follow BroadSky for updates on when firm hard deadlines have been put in place, and that's your target market, okay? We don't know everything, but we're trying to know as fast as it's posted. And all of this does have to be publicly posted. And so, if you look locally as well, you could be ahead of the curve on us. Let us know. If you see a deadline that we don't know about, let your channel manager know, and that becomes your opportunity. That geography becomes your opportunity. More tracking notices. These lists are going to get enormous. This is rolling through the entire country. Okay, there. So now we know that they have to move. The question, and they have to be replaced in a rolling replacement across the country. So now let's gear it down one more. What does it need to be replaced with? This is another way that we don't think in the technology world. We don't think about regulatory requirements. We tend to be in a pretty loosely regulated world. I can buy Azure or I can buy Amazon. Nobody cares. It's up to me. I can buy Bella Cloud or I can buy Ariaka. Nobody cares. It's up to me. There's no regulatory body that tells you what technology to buy. You want to buy an Apple, you want to buy an Android, go for it. That's not the case here. When you get into POTS replacement, you have to roll back up into why do these POTS lines have to be there in the first place? Who's requiring you to have a POTS line? There are 2 strong regulatory bodies that are requiring you to have a POTS line, and they don't change their rules. Fire marshals and insurance companies. The fire marshal requires you to have an alarm in your building. You do not have an option of not putting an alarm in, whether you call it regulatory oversight or whether you call it common sense. The bottom line is, if you have a building, you have a fire panel. That fire panel is certified by the fire marshal. that fire panel must have an independently powered alarm line. And that alarm line must work in the event of a power outage. There are no exceptions to this rule. Copper lines satisfied that requirement. They were an independent line and they carried their own power. But if we get rid of the copper line, we have to have not only communications path, but we have to have battery backup. Broad complies with both. Fire marshals approve this in all 50 states. There are no exceptions to that statement. I will not guarantee that that statement is true for anyone else offering the service in the marketplace. All I know is that we comply in all 50 states. And that's the key to this. If you play that out and you put something in that does not comply with the regulations, when the fire marshal comes out to inspect your change, and they will, you can't just change this without getting it updated. If the fire marshal doesn't approve it, they will disallow the fire alarm panel and they will pull the certificate of occupancy from that building. You cannot be in a building that doesn't have a working fire panel. Or if you're opening a building, you need the fire marshal to sign off that your fire alarm is in compliance before you can open the building and get your COP, certificate of occupancy. If they don't approve it, you don't get your COP, nobody moves in. Again, there are no exceptions to that statement. They don't bend, they don't negotiate, they just say no. It's like the building inspector signing off on your bathroom, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's the fire side. Then on the other side would be if you put something in non-compliance and it gets through and there's an event, if your alarm doesn't go off and you have an event in your building, a fire loss or God forbid loss of life, the insurance company is going to come back and find out if that alarm didn't sound, why didn't it sound? And if it didn't sound because you were in non-compliance, they have the potential to not pay out claims. So general liability policies, they don't pay. Negligence policies, they don't pay. Fire loss, they don't pay. Remember, insurance companies live to deny claims. And so they will check to make sure that an alarm did sound after the event. Fire alarm go off, yes. Was the fire alarm company notified? Yes. Great, we pay. If it's no, they have grounds to not pay. And now insurance doesn't do what insurance is supposed to do, put everyone back together again. So I know I'm pounding on this, but we don't think this way. We just think about technology and making it work. But this is regulatory world and insurance world. And they don't think like we do. They think about complying to the rules. And if you don't comply to the rules, what are the consequences? And those are the consequences. Okay. And then elevators the same way. Elevator inspections aren't as robust as fire and insurance, let's be honest. However, if an elevator inspector doesn't certify, or if your phone doesn't work, or God forbid, an elevator stops working, someone's inside of it and they can't call out, and then something terrible happens to them. This is worst case, but that's why there's a phone in there in the first place, for the worst case. And there's a negligence claim or a suit for damages claim for someone who got trapped in an elevator for a period of time, and that line was not working and they could not call out. Again, there's a negligence problem here and there's an insurance company problem here because the technology that was supposed to be there did not work. So I'm not going to put more words on that because those are enough words, but there are numbers for this. For instance, in the fire marshal world, it's the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, I believe. NFPA 72 signaling code, you have to comply to that. UL stands for Underwriter's Life. Underwriter's Life 864 listed, you have to comply to that. The solution you put in must comply with regulations. And there are regulatory check marks for this. There's more regulations than that. We hit them all. Okay? Okay. So the flip side, that's our opportunity. When we talk to an end user about replacing it, we state you have a deadline, you have to replace it, you don't have an option, I have a certified solution, I can have it to you in 3 weeks. There's really no point in putting this off. Why don't we just take care of this now? There's going to be a crush in this area of people replacing this. Would you want to be first or you want to be last? And so it's a really nice sales opportunity when someone has to buy it and they have a deadline. And then finally, And by the way, it doesn't cost more. You're paying about 60 bucks a month now. I can get you a service for 55 bucks. It'll cost you, we'll get into the pricing later, but it'll cost you, 200 bucks to install it, 150 bucks. That's not that big a deal. Why don't we just take care of this for your building? Why don't we just take care of this for all your buildings? So the regulatory compliance and the deadlines are the sales opportunities that are just handed to us as salespeople. You have to, and you have a deadline. Let's do it now. That's a nice condition to offer an alternative in, especially when it doesn't cost more. Okay, so we talked about how big the market is, and we talked about what you need to put it in. Now let's talk about how it works. So what we do is we drop in a router. It's a router that's proven the field. It's the same router we've been using successfully for failover internet and for primary internet now for 4 years. They keep getting better. We're incredibly versed in this technology. We know how it works, down to the firmware update. What we do is we add an ATA, analog transition adapter, to it, and that's what allows it to generate that same signaling that the device on the other end is looking for. Then we include the router, which I just talked about, and then we include a battery backup. So those are the elements of making this compliant and workable in a power outage situation. Okay, key POTS applications: fire alarm, intruder alarm, elevator, E911. Some ATM machines still use this. Point of sale terminals, anything that runs on analog data. And I'll also add SCADA to this. SCADA is solution command and data acquisition. A lot of utility companies use this. Oil companies use it. The solar and wind guys just went to IP because they're recent, but there's a lot of old school monitoring stations out there that would still go off hook, dial in, report, hang up. And they basically are just saying, we're alive, here's the temperature, that kind of thing. So a lot of that remote, old school Internet of Things ran on copper lines. In order to that left-hand column, it just plays all the way up. For the PSTN stands for Public Switch Telephone Network. Then there's the broad sky internet connection. Then we take it down to the router. We turn it into an ATA, and then we send it out to the device that needs an analog solution. So that's how we gear it up to the cloud, if you will, because it is cloud-based when we make the phone call, and then down all the way down to the elevator line at the end, or the fire alarm line at the end of the network. So this is just networking in a different way. It's just the old network that we haven't thought about in a long time. So that's how you would power. The previous slides are talking about how we power any single line, any elevator line, any fire alarm line, things of that nature. We already enhanced this. The next thing we've done is the box that we're sending out now is dual use. It can be an internet access device, and it can also power a POTS replacement or POTS solution, either way. So 2 solutions, 1 box. We're the first company in the country to come out with this. This is a great opportunity to add not only a POTS line, but as long as we're here, Mr. Customer, don't you want to have an internet failover for this vital business you're running? Because the same rules apply. The line that comes in can be cut or flooded. Cable circuits also are run on poles very frequently. So any Yahoo who goes off the road and knocks over a pole knocks out the internet. Since we can't protect ourselves from the Yahoos, we have to have dual path in. And so, we've been preaching on this for years, but it's still true, and it's only getting more true. You need 2 paths to the internet, and one of them should be wireless. You can't cut a wireless connection, you can't flood an internet connection, and you can't drive your car off the road and terminate a wireless internet connection. So we've combined the 2 together. This is LTE connectivity. It can be for primary or for backup, and then put a POTS line on it. So it becomes a 2-in-1. There's also a cost savings involved. If you bring in that failover device, we can use that same box to generate the POTS line. And so the POTS line incremental cost drops down to 30 bucks. Versus if you bring a POTS line in independently, it costs you $55. So $30 is analogous to what the cable companies are offering if they generate POTS off of their circuit. And so bring in wireless backup, add a $30 POTS line, doesn't cost more. This is a nice service bundle to bring in. It doesn't cost more, and it protects their business. Final note, going back to regulatory, a fire alarm line cannot be dual purposed. A fire alarm line cannot have anything else on it. It must be dedicated to supporting the fire alarm. So this dual use product does not apply to fire. If we bring a fire alarm line in, we can't use it for internet failover. And there are no exceptions to that rule. Elevator line, no problem. So let's gear this down one more. If we're going to replace something, what are we replacing? If you've been in a telco room in any building, people have been walking in and out of there for the last 50 years, and they don't always tag it. So you have copper lines that were brought in, tagged, cut off. Nobody got rid of it. It's just a frayed wire sitting there, and they brought in another one, et cetera, et cetera. If we're going to replace that line, it has to be tagged. So you have 4 elevator lines snaking out through the building, and then those lines terminate in the telco room. It may be tagged, it might not be. Chances are it's a bigger mess than people anticipate. Nobody goes in these rooms, and they've ignored the copper line for 30 years. So tagging the lines is key. We need the end user to be able to tag the line. We can't connect to a line running out into the building if we don't know which line to connect. And so we'll work very hard with you to get those lines tagged, but there is a questionnaire they have to fill out. They have to be able to tag the lines. We have to know what we connect to. And this is a really stupid thing to say, but somebody has to have a key. They have to be able to open that door. And then if we're getting it into the fire panel and we're going to replace that, they need a key for the fire panel. If someone can't open the door, we can't replace it. So again, we don't think about this as much, but we're kind of going old school. And so these are the things that will prevent a sale or prevent an installation of a sale. And so we might as well talk about it now. It allows us to be an expert. It allows you to be an expert. You know what you're talking about. They're like, oh yeah, right, that is a mess in there. And then if you're on site, it's not a bad idea to just walk into the room. I used to do it all the time. Walk into the room and just take a look. And then the end user will understand, yes, I see what I have to replace here, and I see it needs to be tagged. We can do some tagging. We can put what it's called a butt set. You can put it on there and find out what it is to some degree. But if we walk in absolutely blind and no one can find anything, you're looking at a return trip and a failed install, and then extra installation charges. So putting more time into it up front makes sense. And I'm just now noticing that orange panel on the left, someone labeled it Tutti Frutti, and I have no idea why. But that amuses me. So that's what the phone room would look like. We need to tag those lines. Then these are more representational, obviously, but where do these lines go? So in a multi-story building, you're gonna have riser panels. The lines connecting from the IDF room, that's the punch down block. That's where the copper lines terminated in the building. Now they connect out to a wire that's running through the building. That wire needs to be tagged, and then it powers the thing on the other side. So the elevator could be 200 feet away from the IDF room. We're going to connect to it in the IDF room, and then we're going to connect to that line that's powering out. As an alternative, you can just put the line next to the elevator. You don't have to put it all the way where the MDF is. Our DMARC can be wherever we place the router. The router does have to get wireless signaling, but it might be more convenient for them to just place this in the elevator. Every elevator has a little control access room right next to it. And that control access room has the operating board for the elevator, if you will. And so you could just go ahead and put the router, our router, right next to that and connect to the elevator there. The advantage to that is that you no longer have to maintain those 100 or 200 foot cable runs inside of a warehouse or up the riser panel. We can eliminate that line, and we can eliminate the maintenance on that line. What we're finding from building operations people is that those lines are getting frayed and decayed. And if they could get out of needing to maintain them, that would be an operational advantage for them. So this is a distributed placement, I guess I'll call it. Fire panel location is not always in the MDF. Fire panels were put where the fire panel was put. So we just need to get to the fire panel. And sometimes there are multiple fire panels within a building, particularly a bigger building. So we want to find them all. And then a lot of times the fire panel is up high on the wall in an inaccessible place, and then a bunch of stuff was put in front of it. It's obviously very elementary, but we have to be able to get to that fire panel, and then somebody needs a key. All right. There are regulatory requirements that are patchwork. We do know the regs per state. Some fire panels can only be authorized by a licensed fire panel person that carries that license. Sometimes you need a licensed electrician to install on fire panels. We will know those rules before going in. Please work with us to collect that information and make sure the end user understands that we're working in a regulatory environment and we have to pass inspection when we're done. And so some of the questions we ask are not to slow the project down, they're to make sure that we're in compliance. Then just dropping down to elevators, because we're going to replace a lot of elevator panels here. If you scope this out, there's one fire alarm, but there could be 4 elevators. So we might, in any building, if you want to look at it like this, count the number of elevators, that's the number of elevator lines. And then plus add 1 fire panel, maybe 2. So you're looking at an opportunity of 1 to 5 lines per building. And we're not talking about verticals yet, but now I'm going to think about companies who manage buildings, real estate investment trusts, large property management firms, large apartment management companies. They're responsible for the physical plant. And so those are the ones who are going to be scrambling to change this. Or landlords, or anybody who owns a large amount of property. A lot of times people move in, they may be on triple net lease, or they may not. There may be certain things that the building, the end user, who you think of as your traditional customer, this is not their problem. It's whoever owns the building. So property investment firms of all natures are out there, and they control a lot of real estate in this world. And those are the ones that have to think about this. The other one to think about, every quick serve restaurant, every building you drive by is going to need to replace this. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. If there's a physical building, they have to have a fire panel, period. If they have an elevator, they have to have an elevator line. So a lot of the prospects that we drive by because we can't talk to them, they become prospects again. If it has a door and a bathroom, it has a certificate of occupancy and it has to have a fire alarm. So those are sort of the markets, kind of bending our mind around. This is a new addressable market for us. Where are the buyers for this? And those are some suggestions on how to find them. Okay, next slide. Going into the actual installation. Brosky will arrange for the installation of this service. This is not outsourced. We're keeping it in the house through TechLink, our sister company. TechLink has a multi-100,000 site history of installing technology on site. This is what TechLink does. And so we will arrange this with a project manager. There's a dashboard where you can see where you're going. The communication flow will be good. It's not going to get dumped into a black hole, and then we'll find out later, like when you're dealing with the cable companies or some of the larger telcos, we'll probably over communicate on this so that everybody knows what's going on. Okay. The people we send out will be certified. They will know how to do this. They will have the proper licensing and they'll have the proper safety gear. There's different regulatory requirements for that. Some people won't allow people who don't have the right, steel-toed boots and safety harnesses, et cetera, et cetera. In the world of sending people on site, there are regulatory requirements that are largely driven by OSHA and driven by the insurance company themselves. TechLink is well familiar with that world. The people who arrive on site will be in compliance and they won't get turned away, okay? And then complex installations and the opportunities here, as always in the channel, are going to be for your multi-site clients. And so coordinating this on a nationwide rollout is something we're well familiar with. We do it for internet failover all the time. TechLink does it for installing, just as a different example, digital signage in 700 quick serve restaurants across the country. You have to get a hold of the person on site to make sure it gets done, and then you need to communicate that to a project manager at a corporate level so that they can check off their box. The project starts where none of them are done, and then the project ends when all 700 are done. And then everybody signs off that it's working, and they get one bill. That bill will be identified per site. It will come from BroadSky, and it will show each site replacement pot service $54.95. Or if one site has 5 sites on it, then that site will have 5 POTS lines, $54.95 plus 1 fire alarm line, $54.95, like that. So the bill will come out the way you need to see it. The information will come out the way you need to see it. A successful project will be, declared when it's done. It'll be tested, turned up, certified, billed properly. And then of course we collect, and then we send it to the master agent, and then they send a commission on to you. And pretty soon this looks like any other service that you've distributed from a key vendor in your portfolio. We're just trying to make this opportunity kind of move it to the top more, because this wave is coming. This wave is coming. So quick guide, some of the the marketing side, I spoke to that a little bit. Target markets are anyone who's responsible for building operations. Some of the verticals would be government, although government, of course, wants to get it funded through. There's how government works. You got to have SLED, and you got to have some of those certifications. So government's always slower, but they got a lot of POTS lines because they are 100% in regulatory compliance. Hospitals have tons of these. Healthcare has tons of POTS lines. Every warehouse, every building you go by. But you can just break it down and sort any vertical you want. But the bottom line is, if you're responsible for a string of buildings and making sure that you're in compliance and managing that building, you need POTS lines, and you need them to be in compliance. So those are sort of the target markets and verticals that we've separated into. On the sell side, they have to have it. It works the same. It's in compliance. Bottom line. And the monthly MRC isn't going to go up. In fact, it could be going down. When POTS lines transition, there's going to be a transition period from, we don't want to do this anymore, but in the interim, they're going to charge, they being the current copper line providers, they're going to charge what the market will bear, and they will be allowed to charge them. So what people are used to is that my POTS lines, my copper line bill is the same every month, and it's never changed. But now you will start to see price creep on these. If they can charge what the market will bear, they can change the price from $59 a month to $100 a month. And in the copper lines world, what they're saying is, you have no option. I can now charge whatever I want. This is what I want to charge. And so it's not just a like for like cost replacement here. We have a potential cost savings. Not necessarily against past spend, but against future spend. We can port the number if we need to, kind of going over the coding side. There's a questionnaire we'd like people to fill out. That's when we talked about as far as how many lines do we need to replace and where do they go and how are we going to do that. And then the pricing for BroadSky, another advantage here, nationwide pricing, price lock for life. So it's $54.95 for a replacement POTS line anywhere in the country, period. There are no exceptions to that rule. And can we deliver it anywhere in the country? Yes, we can. I guess the only caveat that is the same, if you're on the top of Pikes Peak, I can't get you wireless signal up there because there's no tower. But if you're connected to city sewer, you can get a wireless signal. And then finally, fast turnaround. We're looking at 1 to 3 weeks on the install side here. If we have to do 100 of them, then we'll do it in layers. We'll phase it out, but we're well versed in that. And then when it's all said and done, single support, one call for technical side, 1 bill from BroadSky, identified per site, allocated to the proper cost center, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're done with this, it will look like any other successful rollout. Okay, so I've spoken of the pricing numerous times, but now we just kind of have it here in front of us. It's $54.95 for a POTS line, either way. So alarm, elevator, fax, $55. Fire, which can only support a fire line, $55. These are only being sold on 3-year term. There's no reason not to do anything less than a 3-year term. What's driving your need for a POTS line will never change. And so shorter terms don't make sense. I suppose one caveat to that is if they're leaving the building or something along those lines, we can talk about it, but largely just 3-year makes more sense. And so that's just what we're going with. Setup fees are slightly different, $125 on alarm, elevator, fax, $150 on fire. we're including 2 hours of installation on this. If everything's tagged and we can get in and we can unlock the doors and we know what to install it to, then it should take 2 hours or less. If it's not tagged and there's no keys and we can't get in, then there's going to be a return trip. We really want to avoid that. So information gathering is very key. People don't want to pay more because someone had to come back out again, but that is what's going to happen if they literally can't get in the door. So let's all work together to avoid that outcome. If they do need to be there for 2 hours because we're tracing lines and running around, then it's charged at $95 an hour. In some cases of fire, if you see that asterisk there, if a licensed electrician needs to be on site and they're there for 4 hours, then the cost could be higher. That will be communicated to you before the licensed electrician goes out. So it's not going to be a surprise. Looking forward to questions on that. Okay, so just in summary, pot signs are going away. Is it happening tomorrow? No, it's not happening tomorrow. Is it happening in the next 5 years? Yeah, I think so. I think so. Someone's going to be first and someone's going to be last, but when this is all said and done, nobody wants to provide copper anymore. And Wall Street doesn't want these companies to be in copper anymore. So when Wall Street wants something, Wall Street gets it. Maybe not as soon as they want it, but they get it. There's just not any money in copper anymore. And so it's an enormous opportunity for people like us who can get ahead of the curve. And this is the curve. So if you're on this webinar, you're ahead of the curve. And let's translate knowledge into commissions, if you will. On the marketing side, you know, businesses who have received a notice are now on a timeline. And as this trend develops, you could start going to other companies and saying, look, I'm doing this in Alabama, I'm doing this in Georgia. It's coming to you too. Why don't we just do this all at once? Let's just get this over with. Your costs aren't going up anywhere, so let's just do it, you know, while we have the knowledge in front of us and the project in front of us, let's just take care of this, that kind of thing. And then finally, on the bundled side, go ahead and add internet failover as well. They need a pot sign and they need a secondary or even third access to the internet. That access should be wireless, because you can't cut, flood, or knock it down. And everyone's moving to CCAS, UCAS. Everyone's got everything in the cloud. There's no reason that not to ensure that with an unbreakable internet connection. And then finally, seamless code to install. So that is sort of the summary of the service on the POTS piece. And now let's jump back to this. Again, with COVID-19, you want to talk about timeline. Everybody's home. And so if they need a dedicated internet access, if a company has motivation for their worker to have internet access that's solely dedicated to the business, that is something we can provide. We're still not selling to individuals, we're selling to companies. And so it still needs to be a corporation or an LLC. They're going to be responsible for paying the bill for their distributed workforce. We will ship the internet access to the end user. So we'll send it to their house. It's an easy turn up. So they turn it on and then either Ethernet connect to their laptop, or they can turn on the Wi-Fi and connect that way. The caveat I'm going to add to that is it's going to be password protected. And that password should only be used. They don't want to distribute it to the family, and is what I'm trying to say here. It's still a metered service. The kids are home. Don't give the Wi-Fi password to the kids, and don't use it for streaming. They're home all day. They're gaming. They're doing what, you know, they're consuming media, and so the bill will get out of hand. So they only want to use this to connect to the corporate internet or, you know, to do their job. The advantages of that, however, are the company laptop that just got sent home will be connected to our router that is password protected. It does have, and then it can go right to the corporate firewall. And now their connections are secured versus a bunch of unmonitored, unfirewalled. Anyone can jump on it and use that as a vector of attack to get into the corporate intranet. You know, these routers are purpose built to not do that. That's not something that got invented last week. That was baked in as soon as they were designed. And so only the company user will be on that internet connection, and therefore they will be, you know, much safer from vectors of attack versus sitting in a coffee shop somewhere. Okay. that's probably the opportunity that's in front of us right this second, because no one can talk about anything but this right now, but so be it. So we have two opportunities to, we're not here to try to make money on troubles, but the fact is that America needs reliable internet service from home for the next 2 months. And then a certain percentage of those people just aren't going to come back. They're going to stay home. So the concept of how do I work from home reliably is on everyone's mind right now. And COVID will pass, but the trend towards productivity from home will not. And so we think we're part of that solution. Contact people. If you're in the Northwest, contact Jim Miller. Southwest, Maureen Donovan. Midwest, contact me. Northeast, contact Kevin Brennan. And Southeast, contact Todd Hulsenbeck. Emails and phone numbers listed. Okay. So that was a lot on two different topics, but we're going to open up the Q&A, and there's two ways to come in on Q&A that I see. One of them is the Q&A is on the chat line, or pardon me, is on the Q&A box that I'm going to open up right now. And then the other way is over on the chat, and I'm actually seeing more questions on the chat than on the Q&A. So I'm going to start with the chat. So the way we do this, I read the question and then I give the answer. And if I answered your question, great. If you want to follow up, go right ahead. Okay. So that's what we're going to do right now. All right. So first question is a comment from Krista. I had no idea this was monthly. Good to know. Absolutely. This is a big MRC shift, bottom line. The channel is always ahead, and we're going to be ahead again. And so, that's what we do, right? We get ahead of the curve, and we translate this not necessarily for small businesses. We translate this for businesses. So this is not on their radar. Now it's on yours, and there's a tremendous opportunity. Jack says, I'm still only seeing the start screen. Jack, I assume that got solved. There we go. Mary solved that for him.
Hey, Tom. James here. Can you hear me?
Hi, James.
Hey, I've been answering a lot of questions in the chat, so I've been clearing them out through the Q&A section as we've been going. But I did leave a few up there that I think are really pertinent for us to answer live, so kind of everybody can hear them. One of the first ones was talking about other competitors and what are our advantages to some of the other options that are out there, and some of the other Q&As I was answering as well. I think it's key to point out that wireless is our industry, and it's what we do very well. And so we deploy these routers out there. We have every carrier at our disposal. So we send out these routers, we dual load them with two different carriers based on the address where you're deploying it to. So our engineers actually research it. We look up signal quality. We look up crowdsourced data. We have carrier tools. We have tower mappings, things like that, where we really identify who the best carriers are going to be in those areas. So when we deploy a solution out there, our devices also have 2 SIM card slots in them. So we deploy our number one choice active and a secondary choice inactive. So when we get out there, if for any reason that primary is not supporting or not, we see high latency or the speeds aren't there, we can switch over to a secondary carrier as a choice too. We also have a nationwide network of installers. So we have options for installing external antennas. Anything, we boost signal. I have sites where we're 25 miles away from the nearest cell tower, and we're still seeing 25 megabit per second speeds. So we make sure that wireless connection is the most robust piece of all this. And then, we add in the ATAs and the dialing services to where, whether it's fax, which can be high latency sensitive. So, a lot of people in the past have experienced issues with trying to run faxes over analogs. We kill that with two things. So we make sure that the backhaul internet connection is the best it can be. And then we also use the codecs that are best proved to work with fax on those devices. So all in all, when you come to us for the solution, that final piece is going to be working as good as it possibly could be for that site location. And, we do that site by site for every single device that we deploy.
Yeah.
And the bandwidth, somebody asked about what the bandwidth is for the internet option. It changes site by site, but we'll get you the best that's possible out there on the best possible carrier at that site.
Right. If you're new to these calls, or if James doesn't talk a lot about these calls, but that's James Lawler, Director of Engineering at Brasco Networks. End of the day, responsible for execution and performance. All the systems we put in place to ensure performance across the country originate out of James's group. My original comment on this is, we're an engineering firm with a sales and marketing overlay. At the end of the day, it's got to work. We've put enormous resources into making sure this works. We've proven this out over thousands and thousands of deployments and over years and years of experience. So we will make mistakes occasionally, but we try not to make the same mistake twice. What we're seeing as a theme in the market, what we're seeing in this is that the wireless network is everywhere, but translating into a usable business grade, reliable, always on network, that's where the magic is, if you will, or that's where the knowledge is. So that's what we do. That's what James's group does. It applies to POT services, but it applies to POT service, but it applies to everything that we do. There's a lot of QA on top of this. Okay.
A lot of people have asked about, are there additional monthly fees and taxes and stuff besides the $54.95? I believe sales tax is the only other fee that can be added on, but Tom, you might know more about that than I do. I don't know if there's FCC fees or anything like that.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's actually a great point. When people look at their actual bill right now from a carrier, you'll see that the cost for the line might be arbitrarily $49.99. But that's not what they pay for the line. When you add in the universal service fee charge, and there's 3 other fees that go in there levied by the federal government. There's E-rate charges for it is collected by school districts, et cetera, et cetera. This is POT signs are highly taxed, and so those fees go up. So the cost is not the initial line item, the cost is the bottom line. And that varies by state, but the initial cost is not the total cost per month bottom line. As opposed to that, the broadcast service has sales tax, and that's it. Internet services aren't taxed the same. They don't carry that regulatory fee burden. And so USF is gone, E-rate is gone. Other things that I haven't mentioned are also gone. Sales tax, period. And barring massive change in the regulatory structure, that won't change. And so not only are we not changing taxes, not only are we not changing price lock for life, but total cost of ownership, lose the regulatory fees. And so we're not pitching this as a cost savings, but we'll take it. There's a cost savings in here. Go old school and grab that bill and actually look at it. That one line is probably not 50, it's probably 80. And it could be as high as 130. So if we can duck losing the service and we can save a buck, that's a nice product to have to sell in your portfolio. Okay. James asks, is this being recorded so we can get a copy for our team to view and hear? Yes, it is. Everyone on the webinar will receive this recorded webinar along with the slide deck. And so if you'd like to study it, please do. We'll also announce this at the end, but Broadcast has a YouTube channel and it will be uploaded to a YouTube channel. If you don't want to distribute it yourself, instead you can go to YouTube and review it again. It's like watching your favorite movie over and over and over again.
Jack asked about the battery life on, so it's a little different. So fire and alarm, they have there's a requirement that the fire marshals require, and I believe it's an 8-year life. And so, there is an 8-year life to the batteries. As far as responsibility to replace that, we can provide replacement batteries as those times roll over. It is something that we do stock. So,
yeah.
As far as who is responsible, I would, divert that to Tom. I don't know if we would charge to send a tech out to replace the battery 8 years down the road. I kind of imagine we would. I don't
buy a new battery and hook it up.
We could send it, they could replace it, or
So Denny asked, how are you providing power with LTE? If the box is providing a replacement for POTS using an LTE box, if the power goes out, so does the LTE box, right? Please clarify. So great question. One, the box is powered by the battery backup, as James just told you. So in the event of a total power outage, that's what battery backup is for.
Yeah, so Elevator has another requirement. So they require, I think it's just 4 hours. So if power goes out, they have a 4-hour battery backup. So there's a different battery that's deployed with those solutions. And we actually deploy those battery backups with voice, fax, Elevator. You always have a 4-hour, it's either 4 or 8. I'm sorry, I don't want to speak specific to that. It meets whatever the national requirement is for that backup time. I think it's 4, but it could be 8, but it does meet that. Those are all deployed with battery backups.
And then buried in your question of providing power with LTE, also as I spoke to my opening remarks, that device on the other end needs power to operate. So that the phone in the elevator, when you go off hook for it to work, it needs power. The ATA also provides that. So we're sending the appropriate power to the device on the other end so that it can work.
Yeah, the ATA acts just like, most standard POTS lines do. So, provides that voltage when ringing, voltage when off hook, comes from the ATA.
Yeah. And then final point on this, and something that didn't make the slide deck, but there are boxes that were connected to POTS lines that would take that constant power that the POTS line provides, and they would actually, for instance, they put a light bulb on it. It'd be a very weak light, but still, they would convert it so that your call box had a light, right? And they would be drawing that power from the copper line itself. That constant power application is not provided. So if you go off hook and you need to make a phone call, we'll provide the power when they go off hook. But they would engineer these so that there would be devices on the side of it that would, I'm just going back to the light bulb. They put a light bulb on top of the call box, and the copper line would actually deliver the power of that dim bulb would be blue, it wouldn't be white, so that you could see. That constant power is not something we're providing. So some of the application questions we're getting as we drill into this are, will my red on light be on this? No, it won't. They're going to have to run power up to that. Again, just gearing into what do copper lines do? They carry calls and they provide power. We'll carry the calls and we'll provide power when it's asked for, but that constant power and the things that on the other end that are needing that constant power, those aren't going to work anymore. And so we're going to talk about that as we go into each application, but that, again, that's knowledge that we have, and now it's knowledge that you have, and some of the applications we've seen for that.
Yeah, in most cases, those devices that are going to see issues with that are going to be pretty old. So, most devices manufactured since like 88 don't necessarily require that constant power. So the ATA is a great solution for those.
Yeah.
We have run into, like an odd pulse dialing situation in an old elevator, very old elevator in Los Angeles.
Right.
That it didn't work with it. The dialer needed to be upgraded in the elevator because it was so old. But
Yeah, so
98% of the time these are going to work.
That's the other caveat we ran into as we gear back in. We're going back into the past here. Pulse dialing is way back in the day, where you would spin it over and then it would send pulses out. We do not support pulse dialing. We need DTMF. And so they're going to have to upgrade the phone on the other side. So that's, again, more knowledge on sifting these out. It's a small percentage, but it's best to get the knowledge out there now. Okay. Matt asked, can you send us notices of areas where businesses have been placed on 6 months notice? Mary, you might want to jump in on this. Yes, we are working to compile a master list of notices going out. We're not going to say this is the deadline, because we're not the people to say this is the deadline, but we're trying to keep people as informed as possible. When the notices go, the clock starts to tick. And is it possible that they're going to extend it and they're going to give grace periods and they're going to, give 3-month exemptions? Sure. But Mary, I'm kind of looking, Mary's our marketing director. Mary, I'm kind of looking to you on I think Matt's asking for a pathway of notification on a regional basis.
I think it would be safe to say we're going to have our teams, especially in those regions when we're getting the notices, the salespeople whose regions those are, they're going to be the knowledgeable force of that. So keep in contact for now with your sales rep for your region. And, they can provide you any updates and notifications that we've received so far. And we'll work on getting a list together that we can provide out to agents to have that at your disposal.
Yeah, this is going to go regional. And it's sort of the canary in the coal mine. If you get a question from a geography, that's your first indication, but they're not doing it for no reason. They haven't thought about this in 50 years. If they ask you about POTS replacement, that's your region. The first person to ask is, I almost have to make a COVID exclamation here. If you see one case, there's more. So, sorry. So if one person asks, that region is being affected. They did not come up with this on their own. They got information from another channel, and now they're reaching out to their trusted people to say, is this happening? How do I solve this? That's you and that's us. Sheldon asks on the other topic, how many companies consider setting up remote workforce users like you described? Everybody?
Yeah, it said thousands. I responded in the chat there, but I mean, we've been seeing this blow up from everybody for remote workforce. You know, whether it's just MiFi's or unsecured, getting their base access to internet. So this COVID outbreak, it's definitely woke up the entire nation to, we have huge workforces going to work from home right now, and it's everywhere.
Yeah. Carol asked, do you have any sales clicks? I'm assuming that's collateral, Carol. Sales clicks to target the immediate need for work from home connectivity we can push to the clients. Yes, there is a brochure from that. Please reach out to your channel manager and they will get you the brochure and get you out to the process. And then the next question follow on for that is the contact person based on the partner's location or the client? Mel asked that. Mel, do it on your geography, not the end user opportunity. So if you're in the Northeast, talk to Kevin. If you're in the Southeast, talk to Todd. Whatever color map you're sitting in, call that person because they're the person closest to you and they can talk weather and sports. And that's how we've done it. We want to support the sales partner in the region they're in. We're a nationwide delivery company. So if you're in New York, talk to Kevin, and if your clients in Oregon, fantastic. Kevin will take care of you like that.
Hey, Tom, Matt's got a couple questions he asked related to existing customers. So if we have existing customers using our wireless backup, is it possible for them to go to an upgrade path for the bundled POTS pricing? So, if they already had wireless backup, but they wanted to add a POTS line, can we do the $99.99 bundled POTS and failover if they're existing failover customers?
Yeah, and what he's asking there is, or if you gear that down one more, they've already got wireless failover from Broadcast. Can we send an ATA out and make it work?
And yes,
the incremental cost on that would be $30 a month. But the same installation concept would apply. We still have to tag the line. We still got to send somebody online. We still got to hook up the ATA.
So we still have to pay the activation fees,
Yep.
all of that. Yeah, but the MSRP would just, or their monthly would just go up the 30 a line to add the POTS.
That ATA.
But there'd be a one-time charge for installation and such and activation.
Yeah, so we can add an ATA to an existing router on site. If you've sold Broadsky before, thank you. If we already have technology on site, then it becomes an incremental MRC, but the installation process remains the same. And then Carol asked basically their cost drops based on, so I think what Carol was probably speaking to when we were talking about for greenfield service, if you bring in wireless, then the POTS line is only going to cost you $30 incremental versus an independent POTS line.
The big caveat I'd like to add to that is that Fire Panel is a huge cost savings in its own right, because Fire Panels traditionally have required 2 POTS lines coming into it. So let's say you're even getting a great deal on your current POTS lines and they're $30 a piece. You're paying $60 for 2 lines plus all those fees, right? We replaced that with 1 Firebox with 1 MRC at $54.95. And that replaces those 2 lines. So Fire sells itself. I mean, it's such a great product to get out there because there is a cost savings almost immediately on that one, even if they still have good pricing on their POTS lines in their region.
And then Sheldon asked, what happens if service quality doesn't meet customers' requirements? Is there an out for the customer? So Broadsky offers SLA on all their wireless products. We stay 6 down, 2 up, minimum speed with 100 millisecond round trip latency.
I think it average, peak never over 150, but I mean, traditionally we see them so much lower. Static IP is a little bit caveat to that, raises it 20 milliseconds or so, but on average we see, 80 milliseconds is a high, is pretty average, but we definitely have SLAs. So if for any reason we can't hit our own marks, they're not stuck in the contract.
So that's our classic internet. And on a POTS line, if we put it in and it doesn't work, we're not here to bill people for things that don't work. However, I will flip that around. The biggest risk to this not working is not the performance of the service. We know the service works. The biggest risk to this not working is not tagging the lines on site and not knowing what to connect to. So customers are going to have more responsibility than a traditional service to make this go. If we can't unlock the Fire Panel, it's not our problem, just to be crude. And we're going to have to send someone back out, and we are going to charge for it. And so we don't want those end user outcomes. We don't want those return trips. And therefore we have to get in front of it. We got to have keys. We have to know what lines we're connecting to.
And that's a
If we
lot
don't
in
have
just the
that info,
project management of deployment. And we try to catch as much of that up front with our paperwork. You know, we ask the questions, you know, who's the fire alarm monitoring company? What are the codes to put it into test mode? You know, who are our site contacts? Who is your, you know, alarm company contacts? We try to gather all that, so those are not issues when we get there. But I think you've all probably ran into those IT closets that are a rat's nest of wires that are disorganized, and trying to trace down where lines go. So anything the customers can do to help us identify the line that we're going in to replace can go a long way towards making that a single trip in and out as quick as possible.
yeah. So I moved off the chat and I moved over to the Q&A, and I have 25 here, so we'll just go.
I went through them all already, Tom. There's only one left. Is there a minimum size order?
A lot of times, that A, I learn on it, ask and answer, and then B, everyone else. I'm going to run through them anyway. Rural areas where wireless is everywhere, or poor quality in copper is the best or only option. How do these rulings impact those customers? Or in rural areas where wireless is everywhere, copper is the only option. How do these rulings impact these customers? Yeah, so I mean, my guess is those are maybe the last line. They're going to be the first lines to go or the last lines to go, Steve, in rural areas. This is going to be a big impact on rural. If you look at who they're targeting to get rid of those rural runs first. So that's probably an opportunity right there. You know, again, we're not running these to houses. This is not a home replacement, but for businesses in remote areas, they're going to be targeted first to for price increases. Well, they're the ones that are highest cost to maintain.
I would note that rural is really where we shine the best too, because these are areas where people are so limited on what connectivity options they have. And we come out there and, you know, whether it requires external antennas or, you know, switching carriers while we're out there, we end up getting in 95+% of those rural deployments, getting them excellent internet service that they couldn't even get with wireline providers. You may run into an area, which, you know, Wyoming has quite a few of them, North Dakota, where there just is no wireless service out there. You know, there are some caveats. You'd have to work with local jurisdictions and fire marshals on it, but sometimes they do allow IP-based services for the alarm monitoring and stuff when there's not, you know, copper and standard traditional options available. But it's kind of case-by-case basis for those.
Yeah, so yeah, Mel asked, in apartment complexes, will this work for 911 lines at a swimming pool? Yes, it will. So that's another example of a regulatory requirement. You have a swimming pool, you have a 911 line, it has a copper line. The copper line is going to go away, it needs to be replaced. So turning that up into a larger market opportunity based on Mel's question, apartment complexes might be something you've driven by 1,000 times. Well, they're not an opportunity for me. Now they are. And then the people who run that apartment complex, generally speaking, don't just run one. So XYZ property management firm may have never been on your target list. They are now. And once you start looking for them, it's like green Volkswagens. They're everywhere. The other one would be people who manage HOAs, housing associations. The people who live in a condo don't run the HOA. There's a management company who runs the HOA. They're heavily regulated. They have a swimming pool, they have elevators, and they have fire alarm lines. They have to replace these. There's a lot of opportunities opening up here that aren't on our traditional list of people to talk to, that now put on your list because they have a POTS line. So if you go by a building, they're a prospect. Who owns the building? Who's responsible for regulatory requirements? That's your prospect. We're widening the target market here into areas that we've ignored forever. They have to pay for it too. Okay, Rob asked, how well does this solution work to address analog fax? So James talked about that, and we're using the proper codecs. This is sort of ask and answer, but we'll ask it again. Using the proper codecs and using the AT adapter is reliable for fax. And so if you get into, healthcare is one because of HIPAA, and real estate's another one because they still like fax. Those are two big industries still faxing a lot of stuff back and forth. Pharmacies are a third. If they haven't moved to eFax yet, and they're still going to rely on analog and want to continue to use analog, This can be a replacement for that. Who's ATA? Rob, I don't know. It's the ATA from a manufacturer that's reliable. Works for postage machines, Pitney Bowes, for example, sure. If they're relying on an analog line and they're still calling out for authorization, then it'll work for that. Can these support SCADA lines? Yes, Jack, they can. SCADA, I talked to this about before, but SCADA stands for System Control Acquisition Data something. We've sold thousands of SCADA lines. We have a lot of customers in the oil, gas, solar, wind, energy industry, lots and lots and lots. If you're looking for a new target market, if there's anybody in power near you, go talk to them. Not just for POTS replacement, but for remote data gathering from oil wells, transfer stations, et cetera, et cetera. If you think about a network of pipeline, then you're thinking about a network of wireless gathering points that need to report on what's going on in those operations. So yes, they support SCADA lines.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Hey, just wanted to interject back on the fax question.
Yeah.
That yes, these do work for fax. However, depending on the heaviness or the amount of faxing, it is a 1 gig limit per line, so they could possibly be subject to overages. It's a lot of faxes if that's the case, but just understand that caveat.
Yeah, keep in mind, standard fax is about 2 megabytes per page. So a gigabyte gives you a lot of pages of fax.
Yeah.
About 512 fax pages a month.
Rob asked, first company to have LTE support, how are you different than star to star? Seems like an overstatement. I don't know that I may have misspoke, Rob. If I did, we're not the first company to have LTE support.
What I told them is
okay.
it's what we are first to is the LTE internet for failover with a static IP handoff to the firewall and running the ATA off the same device. Nobody else has been able to figure that out yet, and that's the one thing we were first to market with that.
Yeah, first to market on combining a failover and POTS line replacement. I'm very confident in that statement.
And key with the static IP, we could take this internet connection and plug an ATA into it, and you could plug whatever else you want into it to give it an internet connection. Anybody can do that. But to be able to specifically hand off a static IP address to a router or a firewall, and without having to plug the ATA in behind that firewall, we can do that on the front end. So it's really seamless for the POTS and seamless for the handoff of that IP address to your firewall. And then the rest of your network is managed behind your firewall.
Yeah. Okay. Rich asked, good information. Thank you, Rich. It seems like this is a good solution for my customers. Here's the question. It revolves around elevator application. Question 1, is this approved by regulating agencies in California? Yes. This is approved in all 50 states. If the question is this regulatory approved? The answer is yes. And there are no exceptions to that statement. Is every other product in the market able to make that statement? I don't know. But you have to check that box. And then the next question is, how many POTS lines can be run on one device? I have customers who have multiple elevators and multiple lines, 10 plus lines. James, how many devices can be run off of one?
Yeah, so, really, I would say as far as the hardware, you guys probably don't have to worry about that. We can get you as many POTS lines as you need. As far as hardware limitations for elevators specifically, we traditionally won't run more than 8 over a single cellular backed. So, we have an ATA that provides 8 individual phone lines. And all we would do is if you have more than that is add a second, LTE backhaul device behind the ATA to continue increasing the number of lines we provide. So we really make that seamless to the end user. You tell us how many lines you need. We figure out what hardware we need to deploy, and we can run up to as many lines as you need.
Yeah. Steve asked, I met with someone from Bullseye, competitor of Brodsky, obviously. So a lot of analog line replacements. How do you compete and what are your advantages? There's a lot of competitors running around out there. I don't know the Ben Franklin, us compared to Bullseye, us compared to Mettel, us compared to et cetera. I'll give you a more general answer. If it's delivered over wireless, this is all Brodsky does. We live and breathe wireless replacement. We're sole source dedicated to delivering wireless solutions. Anyone else? Well, Bullseye, Mettel, will just point them out. They're great companies and they do a lot of things, but they do a lot of things. This is a division within the company that may or may not have a subject matter expert on it, like James. They may or may not be regulatory compliant. They may or may not dive into your project and stick with it till the end. I don't know. I know that they're fantastic companies who sell a lot of service. Anything wireless, what we find, and I'm pitching broad sky here, but there's logic behind it. Anything wireless, what we find is that if you need quality and you need performance and you need it to work every time and you need the bill to make sense, we consistently seem to come out on top in that race, whether it's failover or whether it's primary or whether it's making sure that the UCAS works when in a failover event, et cetera. That's what we do, and that's all we do. And the market sort of rewarded that. We're growing really fast. So if you get into wireless and you need your wireless to work, our statement is, and perhaps you resonate with this, go to the experts who do this all the time versus going to someone who's doing it part-time. And the quality tends to play out, the performance tends to play out on a reflection of that statement. We have to make this work because we don't have another business to rely on. And so we do make it work. Tom asked, I'm seeing fire alarms going to internet-based notification with cellular backup. Isn't that a better solution? Fire alarms going to internet-based notification. So that would be like probably another version of that is an IP-based fire alarm, and then they have a cellular backup to that. This is really analogous to that, except you would just skip the IP notification. So you don't run it off the cable circuit.
So,
yeah,
Tom, our fire and alarm panels both have an IP option on them as well. So there are some jurisdictions, and that's why this device meets 100% of the jurisdiction requirements. But there are a few jurisdictions that will require that an Ethernet connection be plugged in as a secondary path on the fire and alarms. And this device has that capability. So where the caveat is, where this device is so much better than other ones is, in 95+% of these deployments, you don't have to have that IP back, and you're replacing two POTS lines with one box and one line. So that's why this is better.
If you think about it, if you think about an IP-based notification, okay, it's an IP-based fire panel, and then what's the next thing they say? You have to have a cellular backup. Why do you have to have a cellular backup? Because if the power disappears, the IP notification goes away. So extending that out, why are we putting an IP notification in at all? Because it's not compliant. And so you have to have a separate path that has to have its own power. So that IP fire panel notification is a workaround, but then they immediately came back with the regulatory statement of, but you still have to have another path, AKA what used to be a copper line, but is now a cellular line. So this service fits into that same regulatory requirement without having to mess with that IP routing.
It's really interesting how the regulations read too when you go through them. Cellular is considered a diverse path source by itself for a few reasons. One, you have multiple cell towers serving an area. So that alone, if one cell tower goes down, it'll connect to a different one. So they consider part of what's built into LTE being diverse path in itself. From those standard POTS lines that can get dug up and cut and shut off, or same with IP-based lines. So there are a few jurisdictions that will require that allow IP hardline communications only. The far vast majority require a diverse path and a secondary connection besides that.
Yeah. Michael asked, hi, Michael. Michael asked, does the $54.95 price include taxes and fees? If not, what is estimate of total cost? It does not include taxes and fees, so they're going to be applied based on local sales tax. Sales tax ranges from 0 to 11% in this country. So whatever the sales tax that applies is what we'll charge. I can't give you a blanket number. I can't, because sales taxes change per jurisdiction. There are also county taxes that get put on. There are special taxing jurisdictions. We have to go out to a tax compliance software based on address to know what taxes to apply in order for us to be in compliance. So 0 to 11 is my estimate, or whatever the sales tax that you're used to paying is, about that. No, it's not going to be double and it's not going to be half. It's going to be right there. And then James said, so $54.95 times 6% state of Michigan, for example, state tax. Yeah, that makes sense. So if state of Michigan applies 6% sales tax, then that's the sales tax that we would charge. And is it possible the county has a tax that they throw on? We see that. Sometimes counties like to throw in their 1% dig or I live in Minnesota, and when we built a stadium, they threw some taxes around and they get applied to weird things. So there's a little variance here based on what government agency is trying to get their slice and what they're authorized to do.
Yeah, it's based on locale, exactly where your site address is. So, so long as we're acquiring, which we have to, for E911 and everything else, so when we acquire that site address, we run the taxes based off that locale, whether it's city, county, state taxes, depending on what they have.
Yeah, we tax based on what the regulatory software says we have to tax. We're obviously, we tax what we have to, and we don't tax what we don't. And Broad Sky Accounting works very hard to make sure things are taxed properly, using compliant software, because you cannot play with that when you're collecting taxes and remitting it to the government. Okay. John asks, is there a minimum size order? No. If you need one, let's do one. And if you need 100, let's do 100. And if you need 1,000, then we have a nice opportunity in front of us. So, but no, John, or anyone on this call, if you need one, let's do one. And then Stephen asks, are there data limits on the internet and overage charges? So in the world of POTS and alarm, there are no data limits because we're only processing alarms. And in the world of failover, yes. So if we bundle the service together, it's going to come standard with a 1 gig data package. If they go over that, then there are overages that apply. We can change their plan in month to accommodate that. Notifications are sent. This kind of goes into the whole Broad Sky, how do we manage data overages? We've been on this webinar for a long time, but it's still really important in the world of wireless. It is metered. We're maniacal about letting people know what their data usage and overages are.
So we set up automated data usage notifications for all failover devices. So you will get an automated email from the system when you hit 85 and 90%, I believe, of your data usage, and again at 100%. And then we also have a data analyst who is constantly monitoring, tracking for, hey, if you continue on this path, will you go over? And he sends out notifications, usually weekly, is a backup going, hey, just want to let you know, we've been monitoring this line. And if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to see this on your bill. So we try to be very proactive about that.
And I think that is all the questions.
Sheldon had one more question in the chat. He asked if we can leverage satellite in remote areas. They have a client with 150 locations, and it's challenging right now for coverage. All POTS and want to migrate, but limited with coverage. So I would say, give us your site list, let us run it, and we can tell you the sites that are going to be problematic. No, it doesn't work over satellite. So we do offer satellite connectivity. But the POTS replacement, the latency is just too high on satellite for that. It's too high to work for VoIP in most cases. There are some caveats to that. There are some satellite providers who have their own VoIP solution that they can bundle with it. But for the most part, no. VoIP and POTS in general do not work over satellite due to the high latency.
Yeah, and it's not going to hit regulatory compliance either. The fire marshal's they're not going to go from it. That hasn't met the rules. So POTS over SAT, based on the information we have in front of us today, is not going to meet requirements. On the flip side, the cellular networks, when they put the SAT in, it could have been because they couldn't get to the cellular. A lot of SAT solutions are 5-10 years old, and that reality has changed. The cell networks extend out much further than they used to. It's hard to get outside of range of one of the cell towers. You can do it, but you got to work.
Well, and that's why I say send us that site list, because just the carrier mapping tools, if you're using, AT&T's coverage map or Verizon's coverage map, you may see an area where you're not in coverage. We have antenna solutions where we can get a directional antenna. And like I said, I have hundreds of sites running in areas where the carriers say they don't support coverage there, and we're getting business class speeds with our antenna solutions. So let us take a look at the site lists, and we can definitely tell you if something's plausible. We can do site surveys and send a technician out with the gear and have them test it before you actually commit and sign a contract, and let you know, hey, here's what service we get out there prior to signing up. So
yeah, I mean, this rolls up to the larger concept. If there's wireless signal available outside the building, we will get it inside the building one way or another. The only way that we can't get service to somebody is if there is no cell coverage anywhere. And that includes putting an antenna up, pointing it at the tower, amping it, and there's still no signal.
Right. I mean,
Those locations are few
we
and far
regularly
between.
do installs where our technicians can't get enough cell service on their phone outside to talk with us. But once we get the antenna up, our device is getting speeds and working.
Yeah.
So even when the cell phone might not work outside, there are occasions we can make ours work still. So, you know, we amplify the gains and really get a directional antenna out there to make those work. So
James has worked
keep that in
miracles.
mind.
But having said that, 98% of what we install does not need an external antenna. I'm just gonna say that because there's an old belief running around that you can't get cell service working unless you put an antenna on the building. That kind of comes from fixed wireless land. It's absolutely not true. We ran the stats. I think we did 3% antenna installs last year, 2% antenna installs over the entire 2019 deployment. So 98 out of 100 will get this to you without an external antenna. In those 2% cases where it's external antenna is needed, we're not going to quit. We're going to keep going. And that's one of the differences between us and a company that maybe has this as a sidebar or part-time. At the point of external antenna, that's where they tend to quit, where they have to reach out to someone else and go through the learning curve. We've done it hundreds of times. So if you need it to work on wireless, we'll make it work on wireless. This is all we do. And Maureen let me know that there was open questions. But
No,
Maureen, I don't
you got
see
those
them.
2 questions. I just didn't
I
clear
did.
them out of the open queue. We're
Okay.
good.
Okay, we're good. All right. Well, that was. Thank you for spending so much time with Broad Sky. Everyone's busy, and everyone's up and running around. You know, we kind of keep making these points over and over again, but I guess just in summary, POS is a coming wave. You now have this information. There's money here. Their entire market's opening up that were not open before. The time is not tomorrow, but if you play the logic train out here, copper's going away. And it's time to, if we're going to replace it, we might as well replace it now. If we look at it, if projects are being stalled or if people aren't rolling things out, you know, for obvious reasons, this might not be a bad time to just go in and take care of this. They're spending $60 a month on this POTS line. When we replace the service, they're going to spend $55 a month. So their costs don't go up. It's a chance to take care of it now. So we have sort of a gap opportunity as maybe other deployments are being held back or for 1 to 3 months while people wait and see. There's no reason to wait and see on this. Costs don't go up, get ahead of the curve. Let's take care of it now. You know, that kind of logic. So, you know, we're all looking to make sure that sales numbers stay flat. I don't think they're going to go up, but flat and not go down. This is an opportunity to step in and find new contacts and come up with a new solution that solves a problem that they definitely have. So I'll put that out there. Maureen Donovan, did I miss anything? Do you have any wisdom you'd like to add to any of the commentary?
No, it was great questions. A lot of great questions, a lot of great participation. I think this is our longest webinar to date. But it's obviously reflected on the interest in the information and really the opportunity out there. So great job. Just as always, as you said in the beginning, but if anybody joined late, we always record our webinars. So there will be another mailer going out with a link to the recorded webinar, to the slide deck. We'll also include our flyer for remote workers in that. And any of our previous webinars that Tom does monthly, or any of us that we've done, as well as some how-to videos that James has done, are all on our YouTube channel. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's YouTube, and then it's I think it's /Broad Sky Networks. So a lot of awesome information on there. So and thank you again. We'll have another one of these in a month.
Let's do it again. On YouTube, if you want to search Broad Sky Networks. If you search Broad Sky, you get some odd results.
Yeah, you get a weird picture.
Let's just call it odd. But Broad Sky Networks will take you right to the YouTube channel. And you have a chance to subscribe, which is exciting. I mean, let's be honest. It's exciting. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. Look forward to talking to you again.